In the early evening of June 28, 1980, a man named Robert Davidson was riding his motorcycle along Interstate 74 near a quiet town outside Indianapolis. His wife, Wanda, held onto him tightly as dark storm clouds gathered overhead. They were racing against the rain, but the storm reached them first. Heavy drops began to fall, forcing Robert to pull over so they could put on rain gear. As Wanda stepped off the bike and Robert reached for the storage compartment, a sudden flash lit the sky. In an instant, Robert was struck by lightning. His body locked up, pain surged through him, and he collapsed onto the pavement as everything went dark. Emergency responders arrived minutes later. Among them was a paramedic named Kimberly, who immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Robert had no pulse, his skin had turned pale, and his wife stood nearby in shock. CPR began as another responder called for a medical helicopter. Then something impossible happened. Without warning, the ambulance completely lost power, engine, lights, radio, everything. Both the main and backup batteries failed at the same time, something that wasn't supposed to happen under any circumstance. As confusion spread, a figure appeared. A woman wearing a long black dress ran toward them along the empty highway, shouting and waving a Bible. She demanded to be allowed to touch Robert, insisting she could save him. With no medical equipment functioning and no other options, the responders hesitated, but ultimately stepped aside. The woman knelt beside Robert and began to pray quietly. Moments later, her behavior changed. She slammed the Bible against the ground, shouting upward with intense force. Then, in a voice that did not seem her own, she began speaking words no one could understand. Suddenly, she stopped. She stood up calmly, turned around, and walked back down the road. Almost instantly, the ambulance roared back to life. Lights flickered on, equipment powered up, and Robert began breathing. Stunned, the responders watched as the helicopter arrived and rushed Robert to the hospital. When they turned back to look for the woman in black, she was gone, vanished into an open field with nowhere to hide. Later, they learned that the land beside the highway once held a 19th-century religious settlement known for intense prayer rituals and speaking in tongues, destroyed by fire and abandoned long ago. The woman in black was never seen again. Now let's move to our second story from China. One evening in February 2011, a man in his 30s named Yang sat quietly eating dinner inside his home in a remote rural village in China. Around the table sat the 5 elderly women he lived with, women he lovingly called his aunts. No one spoke during dinner. The silence wasn't awkward. In fact, Yang preferred it. He had been born with a disability that made speaking extremely difficult, and he was blind in one eye. Throughout his life, people had mocked him for it. Talking to strangers often led to humiliation, so he avoided it whenever he could. But with his aunts, it was different. They never judged him, never pressured him to speak. They accepted him completely, and Yang took great pride in caring for them, making sure they were fed, comfortable, and safe in their old age. After dinner, Yang quietly cleared the table. He helped one aunt to her bedroom and tucked her in. As he turned to help the next, a sound stopped him cold. Sirens. Yang froze. His village was so remote it didn't even have its own police force. In his entire life, he had never seen a police car, never heard a siren. Curiosity pulled him outside. Down the hill, nearly 600 feet away, 2 police cars sat with their lights flashing. Something was very wrong. Yang slowly walked closer, stopping at a distance. He didn't want to interfere, and he definitely didn't want to speak to the police. At the base of the hill, 2 officers stood with a distraught farmer who was crying uncontrollably. After calming him down, they asked him to explain what had happened. The farmer told them about a nightmare. For nearly a week, he had dreamed of his mother, surrounded by darkness, screaming for help. Every time he tried to reach her, she vanished. The dreams were so vivid, so terrifying, that he finally decided to check on her in person. When he arrived at her home, she was gone. Panicked, he called the police. The officers told him to go home while they organized a search. Later that night, police teams canvassed the village. During questioning, they received a strange tip, one that led them straight to Yang's home. The front door was wide open. No response. Inside, the house was dark, silent, and cluttered. Dishes, towels, and trash lay scattered across the floor. The officers called Yang's name again and again, but no one answered. At the very back of the home, they entered a bedroom. 5 elderly women lay in their beds, asleep, or so it seemed. The officers immediately realized something was horribly wrong. Despite all the shouting, none of the women had moved. Upon closer inspection, the truth became undeniable. They were dead. They had been dead for a long time. The farmer's missing mother was among them. Investigators soon uncovered the tragic reality. The women Young called his aunts weren't related to him by blood, but they were the only people who had ever shown him kindness. When they died of natural causes, Young didn't understand what death meant. All he knew was that he couldn't lose them, so one by one, he exhumed their bodies and brought them home, continuing to care for them as if they were still alive. Young was arrested, but instead of prison, he was sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. The women were reburied with dignity, and the farmer's nightmares? They stopped the very night his mother was laid to rest.